My SIL faked a pregnancy to ruin my wedding. The clink of champagne glasses had barely faded when Lisa stood up, tears sparkling in her eyes. I was still sitting at the head table, my new husband's hand warm in mine, when she tapped her glass with a fork and cleared her throat dramatically. "Everyone," she said, voice trembling just enough to sound authentic, "I have something to share." The room, still buzzing from the first dances and toasts, fell quiet. My heart sank, not because I knew exactly what was coming. Not yet, but because I knew Lisa. And Lisa didn't cry without an audience. "I wasn't going to say anything today," she continued, one manicured hand pressing theatrically to her flat stomach. "But I just can't keep it a secret any longer." My husband, Matt, stiffened beside me. He knew Lisa too. The words came out in a rush, soaked in false humility. "I'm pregnant," she sobbed, beaming through her tears. The guests gasped, a few clapping politely, confused but swept along by the emotion of it all. All eyes shifted. Off me. Off Matt. Off the vows we had barely finished speaking. And onto her. Lisa, standing there in her glittering bridesmaid gown, stealing the spotlight without a second thought. Matt squeezed my hand harder under the table. My mouth was dry. My cheeks burned. I forced a smile, or something close to it, while the room erupted around us. Such a blessing. A wedding and a baby in the same year. Your family has so much to celebrate. The walls felt like they were closing in. This was supposed to be my day. Our day. And Lisa had hijacked it with 3 little words. I couldn't prove anything yet. Not here. Not now. But deep down, deeper than words could reach, I knew. Lisa's announcement wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a happy accident. It was a move. Calculated. Cold. Cruel. And by the time I finally uncovered the truth, it would leave everyone speechless. Especially her. Looking back, the signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. In the months leading up to the wedding, Lisa had been different. Not overtly hostile. Not openly rude. Just off. At first, I blamed it on stress. After all, weddings brought out the worst in a lot of people. Family dynamics, travel plans, endless fittings. It wasn't exactly a recipe for calm. Lisa had been one of the first people I asked to be in my bridal party. Matt's only sister. The woman who was supposed to become my family too. I wanted her to feel included, important. And she did at first. She gushed about dresses. She sent me endless Pinterest boards full of flower arrangements and table settings. She insisted, on helping plan my bridal shower. But slowly things shifted. She started questioning every decision I made. "Are you sure that's the color you want for the bridesmaids' dresses? It might wash you out. Maybe you should rethink the venue. It's a little modest, don't you think?" At the bachelorette party, she spent the night complaining about the food, the music, the decor. All things she had helped pick. She rolled her eyes when I tried on veils. She sighed heavily during cake tastings. Small things. Easy to brush off. It wasn't until the week of the wedding that it became harder to ignore. She missed the final dress fitting without calling. She forgot to pick up the table cards. She showed up 2 hours late to the rehearsal dinner, looking annoyed and offering no real apology. Still, I made excuses for her. She's busy. She's overwhelmed. She'll come around. Because what else was I supposed to believe? I had no way of knowing that Lisa wasn't overwhelmed. She wasn't stressed. She was planning her own moment. A bigger, louder, more dazzling moment. One designed to overshadow mine completely. And as much as it hurt to realize it, that had been her plan all along. Lisa had always been the golden child. The Bennett family practically revolved around her. A glittering sun no one dared eclipse. Growing up, Matt said she could do no wrong. Star athlete. Prom queen. Graduated college early, with honors, of course. Married young to a man from a good family. Everything she touched turned to gold. Or at least, that's what everyone was supposed to believe. At family gatherings, Lisa didn't just attend, she performed. Stories about her career successes. Photo shoots of her designer wardrobe. Detailed updates about her perfect marriage, her perfect house, her perfect life. It wasn't enough for Lisa to be happy. She had to be admired. Envied. The few times Matt hinted that things might not be so picture-perfect. A rough patch in her marriage, a failed promotion. His parents shut him down immediately. "Don't be negative," his mother would snap. "Lisa works so hard. She deserves good things." Deserve. That was a word the Bennetts used a lot when they talked about Lisa. She deserved the best. She deserved attention. She deserved sympathy for every minor inconvenience life threw her way. And somehow, without anyone ever saying it out loud, the rest of us absorbed the unspoken rule. When Lisa wanted the spotlight, you gave it to her. No questions asked. Matt had learned to shrug it off. That's just Lisa, he'd say when she monopolized conversations or turned birthdays into competitions. And for a long time, I had accepted that, too. I didn't need to compete with her. I had Matt. We had our life, our love, our future. Until our wedding came along. Until it became clear that for once, I was the one at the center of everything. And Lisa? Lisa couldn't stand it. She didn't know how to let someone else have their moment. So instead of celebrating with us, she decided to steal what she thought was rightfully hers. No matter the cost. No matter the lies. The week of the wedding should have been magical. Instead, it felt like trying to steer a ship through a brewing storm. And Lisa was the one kicking up the waves. It started with little things. At the final venue walkthrough, she accidentally knocked over the centerpiece samples. Then laughed it off like it was nothing. "I'm just so clumsy these days," she said, winking at the coordinator. At the bridesmaids' luncheon, she made a snide joke about how tight my dress must be getting. "Hope you can breathe on the big day," she giggled, as if insulting the bride was perfectly normal. When my maid of honor, my best friend Julia, tried to intervene, Lisa pulled her aside and warned her not to stress the bride out. "Claire's emotional," she said, loud enough for me to hear. "We have to be extra patient with her." I smiled through gritted teeth, bit my tongue until it nearly bled. It wasn't worth fighting. Not yet. On the night of the rehearsal dinner, Lisa delivered the final blow. She showed up in a white dress. Not cream. Not blush. White. A sleek, off-the-shoulder designer gown that could have passed for a second wedding dress if you glanced too quickly. When Matt's mother complimented her, Lisa laughed and said, "Well, when you look this good, you have to flaunt it." The other bridesmaids bristled. Julia actually looked ready to throw her wine glass. But I stayed calm, smiled, refused to let her win. Because deep down I could feel it. Lisa was pushing boundaries for a reason, testing how much attention she could steal without being called out. And now, standing on the edge of my wedding weekend, I knew one thing for certain. She wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. And if I wasn't careful, she would find a way to make my wedding about her. No matter how many lies she had to tell. The whispers started the morning of the wedding. Soft. Subtle. Slithering through the bridal suite, like smoke no one wanted to acknowledge. I caught snippets while getting my hair done. A bridesmaid glancing nervously at another. A half-finished sentence cut off when I entered the room. I brushed it off at first. Pre-wedding jitters. Nerves. But as the hours ticked by, the energy shifted. Something was wrong. Something I wasn't being told. Julia pulled me aside just before I stepped into my dress. "There's something you should know," she said, biting her lip. "It's probably nothing, but..." "What?" I asked, my heart lurching. She hesitated. "Lisa's been saying things, dropping hints, about being pregnant." Pregnant. The word hung between us, heavy and sour. I felt my stomach flip, the room tilting slightly around me. "Pregnant? Now? Today?" I swallowed hard. "Is it true?" Julia's expression said it all. "I don't know," she whispered. "But she's definitely talking about it. To anyone who'll listen." I leaned back against the vanity, feeling suddenly disconnected from my own reflection. Why would she? But I already knew why. Because nothing could pull focus faster than a baby announcement. Because nothing could upstage a bride faster than the promise of new life. I stared at my wedding dress hanging in the corner. The dress I had spent months dreaming about. The dress that was supposed to mark the beginning of my forever. And I realized, with a sick twist of certainty, Lisa wasn't content being part of the day. She wanted to own it. To make sure that when people remembered my wedding, they would remember her too. Her announcement. Her moment. Her carefully staged performance. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply, forcing my hands to stop shaking. Not today, I thought. You don't get to take today from me. No matter what lies she spun. No matter how much attention she craved. This day would not belong to her. Not if I had anything to say about it. The reception was everything I had dreamed of. At first. Twinkling lights wrapped the trees outside the venue. The dance floor pulsed with music and laughter. Our families mingled, glasses raised in celebration. For a few precious hours, I let myself believe that love, real love, could outshine everything else. And then Lisa stood up. I watched her rise from her seat like a queen ascending a throne, tapping her fork against her glass to demand the room's attention. I knew before she even opened her mouth. "My family," she began, her voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. "I know today is about Claire and Matt." A few guests chuckled warmly. Polite. Encouraging. Lisa smiled, wide and luminous. "But," she continued, pressing her hand dramatically to her stomach, "I just found out some news, and I can't keep it in any longer." The room leaned in. Chairs creaked as people turned to face her. "I'm pregnant," she blurted, her voice catching with fake emotion. "We're having a baby." Gasps. Cheers. Applause. The DJ scrambled to lower the music. My mother-in-law clutched her hands to her chest, tears springing to her eyes. Cameras flashed. Phones lifted. Lisa's grin widened as she soaked in the spotlight she had carved out for herself, with a lie. Beside me, Matt swore softly under his breath, his hand clenching into a fist on the table. Julia shot me a horrified look from across the room. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This was supposed to be our first dance, our first toast, our first memory as husband and wife. And Lisa had stolen it without blinking. I pasted a brittle smile onto my face, forcing myself to sit up straighter. Not today. Not now. She could steal the cameras. She could steal the gasps and applause. But she would not steal my dignity. And soon enough, very soon, she would regret ever thinking she could. Because some lies are too big to hold up under their own weight. And Lisa was about to find that out the hard way. After the shock of Lisa's announcement wore off, something didn't sit right. It gnawed at me through the toasts, through the cake cutting, through the forced smiles and hugs and congratulations. Her story didn't add up. I couldn't shake it. The way she had touched her stomach too deliberately. The way her husband, Ryan, had looked at her like he was seeing the announcement for the first time too. The stunned confusion that flickered across his face before he quickly covered it with a shaky smile. No one else seemed to notice. Or maybe they didn't want to notice. They were too busy gushing over her. Too busy congratulating her. Too busy letting the magic of the moment blind them. But I saw it. The cracks. When Julia cornered me near the dessert table later that night, I knew she had seen them too. "You don't believe her, do you?" she asked in a low voice, her eyes scanning the room to make sure no one overheard. I shook my head slowly. "Something's off," I whispered back. "I don't know what it is yet, but it's not real." Julia nodded grimly. "I've been watching her all night. She's not acting like someone who just found out they're pregnant. She was acting like someone who had rehearsed this performance. Down to the trembling voice. The misty eyes. The carefully placed hand. But there were no quiet, teary moments between her and Ryan. No glances of awe or tenderness. Only smugness. Only calculation. And the more I watched her, the more certain I became. Lisa didn't love the idea of becoming a mother. She loved the idea of becoming the center of attention. No matter what it cost. Including her dignity. Including our family. Including me. I didn't know how yet. Or when. But I promised myself right then and there. I would find the truth. And when I did, Lisa's empire of lies would come crashing down. Louder than any toast she ever stole. The morning after the wedding, while most guests were still nursing hangovers and scrolling through photos, Julia showed up at my hotel room with a plan. She didn't even knock. Just barged in with 2 coffees, a notebook, and that dangerous gleam in her eye she usually reserved for Black Friday sales. "I couldn't sleep," she said, dropping onto the couch. And I started thinking, if Lisa really is pregnant, there'll be signs. I took the coffee gratefully, my brain still foggy from too little sleep and too much emotional whiplash. "What kind of signs?" I asked. Julia flipped open the notebook, already brimming with ideas. Prenatal appointments. Pharmacy pickups. Insurance paperwork. Something. Nobody just finds out they're pregnant and has no proof. I raised an eyebrow. "You want to spy on her?" "Not spy," she said, grinning wickedly. "Investigate." I hesitated. It felt wrong. Petty. But then I remembered Lisa standing in the center of that reception hall, soaking up the spotlight, turning my wedding into her personal announcement party. And I remembered the hollow ache in my chest as the attention, the love, shifted away from us. No, this wasn't petty. This was necessary. If we find something, I said slowly, we have to be smart about how we use it. Julia nodded. Of course. This isn't about blowing up your family. It's about making sure the truth comes out, on your terms. Over the next few days, we worked quietly. Julia found a contact at the pharmacy Lisa frequented, an old high school friend who owed her a favor. I casually texted Ryan, congratulating him and asking friendly questions. The more we dug, the clearer it became. There were no doctor's appointments, no prenatal vitamins, no insurance updates, no plans, no excitement from Ryan, only confusion and a growing sense of unease. Lisa's story unraveled faster than we expected, and with every new piece of information, I felt a little stronger, a little braver, a little closer to taking back what she had stolen, because now we had proof, and soon the whole family would too. It didn't take long for the cracks to split wide open. 3 days after the wedding, Julia forwarded me a series of screenshots, quiet proof that Lisa's story was already unraveling. There were no prenatal vitamins listed in her pharmacy records, no folic acid supplements, no prescriptions tied to a new pregnancy. Nothing. Meanwhile, Ryan, who had seemed more bewildered than joyful at the reception, finally cracked under the weight of it all. He called Matt late one night, his voice tight and uncertain, like he was still trying to make sense of it himself. "I don't know what's going on," he said, words tumbling out in a rush. "One minute she's crying and talking about cribs, the next she's brushing me off and changing the subject. She won't show me a test. She keeps saying it's too early to see a doctor." Matt stayed silent, listening, letting him talk. "And the thing is," Ryan continued, dropping his voice even lower, "we weren't even trying. We haven't really been close, in a while." He didn't need to spell it out. The implication hung heavy in the air. If they hadn't even been intimate, then there was no way Lisa could be pregnant. No way her dramatic announcement was anything but a fabrication. Matt offered a few quiet words of support, promised discretion, and hung up. For a long moment, we just sat there at the kitchen table, the dim light buzzing faintly above us, the truth sinking in like a stone. Lisa hadn't just lied. She had staged an entire performance. She had weaponized the joy of new life to sabotage ours. And for what? For attention? For validation? For the hollow applause that came from stealing someone else's moment? Whatever twisted satisfaction she thought she had won, it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what came next. Because lies that big can't be buried forever. They fester. They poison everything around them. And eventually, no matter how carefully constructed, they collapse. Lisa's day of reckoning wasn't just coming. It was already here. We didn't rush. That was the first rule Matt and I agreed on. Lisa had detonated her bomb at the reception, grabbing as much attention as she could before slipping back into silence. She probably thought the chaos had passed, that the applause had sealed her lie beyond question. She was wrong. The second rule we agreed on: no drama. If we exposed her, it wouldn't be with shouting matches or public humiliation. We weren't going to sink to her level. She craved spectacle. We would offer quiet truth. A few days later, my opportunity arrived. Matt's parents decided to host a small family brunch the following Sunday. One last wedding celebration before guests flew home. Lisa would be there. Ryan would be there. Everyone who mattered would be seated around that table. I could have called her out in front of everyone. Could have demanded answers. Could have thrown the evidence onto the table like an indictment. But that wasn't the plan. Instead, I asked Julia to casually mention a special surprise we had planned for brunch, a little announcement of our own. Curiosity spread like wildfire through the group texts. Even Lisa couldn't resist texting me late that night. "Can't wait to hear your news. Hope it's as exciting as mine," winking face. I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. There was no need to reply. The trap was already set. Matt and I spent that week preparing, gathering the proof, practicing what we would say, making sure every move was deliberate. We weren't going to accuse. We weren't going to insult. We were simply going to tell the truth. And once the truth was spoken aloud, it would be impossible to unhear. Lisa's castle of lies was already crumbling. All we had to do was give it one final, gentle push. And then stand back and watch it fall. The brunch started like any other family gathering. Warm smiles, clinking glasses, laughter a little too loud. Lisa arrived late, of course, floating through the doorway in a sundress that clung a little too tightly to her suspiciously unchanged figure. No morning sickness, no tiredness, no signs of the woman she claimed to be. I watched her work the room, collecting congratulations, soaking up admiration. It might have almost been impressive, if it hadn't been so deeply pathetic. Julia caught my eye from across the table and gave a tiny nod. It was time. Matt stood first, clearing his throat lightly to gather everyone's attention. "I just wanted to thank everyone again," he said, smiling easily, "for being part of our wedding, for your support, for your love." Murmured agreement echoed around the table. "And," he continued, "we wanted to take a moment to celebrate something else." Lisa's eyes lit up. She leaned forward, practically vibrating with excitement, already preparing for another round of stolen applause. Matt turned to me, and I rose slowly from my chair. "We're so grateful to start this next chapter with honesty and real family values," I said, my voice steady, carrying just enough weight to sharpen the room's focus. "Which is why we want to share some news." Whispers rippled. Chairs shifted. "Some truths," I added, letting my gaze drift deliberately to Lisa. Her smile faltered just slightly. Julia handed Matt a small folder. The printed pharmacy records, the insurance statements, the texts. Matt laid it calmly in the center of the table. "We thought everyone should have the chance to celebrate real beginnings," he said. Dead silence. Lisa blinked, confusion flashing across her face. Then her hand darted out, snatching up the papers. Her eyes scanned the pages, the evidence laid bare. No pregnancy. No preparations. No proof. Her face drained of color. Around the table, the realization began to settle like dust. Soft gasps. Sharp looks. And Lisa, the girl who had built a moment on lies, had nowhere left to hide. At first, Lisa tried to laugh it off. She tossed the papers onto the table like they were meaningless, forcing a brittle chuckle. "You really went digging through my medical records?" she said, voice pitched high with fake outrage. "That's illegal, you know." No one laughed with her. No one moved. Ryan stared at her, face pale, his hands clenching into fists on the table. "Lisa," he said slowly, voice cracking. "Tell the truth." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For a moment, she seemed to think she could still spin it, that she could weep, make herself the victim, twist the story into something sympathetic. But the room was already turning. Matt's parents sat rigid and silent, disappointment etched into every line of their faces. My parents looked at me, not with pity but with pride. Even Julia, usually the most impulsive of us all, stayed quiet, giving Lisa nothing to fight against. The walls Lisa had built with her lies crumbled one by one, until she stood alone in the wreckage. Finally, she shoved her chair back with a screech and stood. "I don't owe you an explanation," she hissed, her voice sharp and venomous. "None of you." She grabbed her purse, knocking over a water glass as she stormed away. No one followed. No one called after her. The front door slammed with a hollow finality that seemed to suck the air from the room. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Ryan, poor devastated Ryan, stood up too. Without a word, he walked to the door and left, his shoulders heavy with betrayal. I sat back down, feeling the weight of the morning settle into something solid and irreversible. It was over. Not just the lie. Not just Lisa's ridiculous stunt. The illusion of her. The perfect daughter, the golden sister, the sparkling centerpiece of every room, was gone. And for the first time in years, the family looked around and saw each other clearly. Saw me clearly. Not as an afterthought. Not as a stagehand in someone else's performance. As a woman who had refused to be erased. In the weeks that followed, the dust settled slowly. Lisa didn't apologize. Not to me. Not to Matt. Not even to her own parents. She simply vanished, ghosted from family chats, missing from gatherings, her once commanding presence now just a hollow space no one rushed to fill. Ryan moved out by the end of the month. Julia heard through mutual friends that he filed for divorce quietly, citing irreconcilable differences. Matt and I didn't celebrate her downfall. There was no victory dance, no gloating. Just relief. Relief that we no longer had to twist ourselves into knots to accommodate her chaos. Relief that we had reclaimed our wedding, even if only in spirit. Relief that the truth, at last, belonged to us. The family was different after that. Quieter. Gentler. More real. No more performances at Sunday dinners. No more competing for who could shine the brightest. Just messy, beautiful, imperfect people trying their best to show up for each other. For the first time since I had joined the Bennetts, I felt like I belonged. Not because I had fought for a seat at the table, but because I had stopped shrinking to fit someone else's spotlight. I had built my own light. Steady. Strong. Unshakable. One afternoon, a few months later, Matt and I stood in our backyard under a tangle of fairy lights, grilling burgers with friends, our wedding photo. The real one, untouched by drama, framed proudly in our living room. Julia clinked her beer against mine and smirked. "You know," she said, "I think you threw a better party taking Lisa down than you did at the reception." I laughed, real and full and free. Because she was wrong. The best thing I did wasn't exposing Lisa. It was choosing myself. Choosing Matt. Choosing truth over appearances, no matter the cost. And that choice had given me more than any applause ever could. It had given me peace. Spring crept into our lives quietly that year. No dramatic announcements. No grand performances. Just slow, steady change, the kind you only notice when you finally stop waiting for the next disaster. Matt and I moved into a new house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Just ours. The walls were still bare. The garden needed work. But it felt like home in a way nothing else ever had. On Saturday mornings, we made coffee and wandered through farmers' markets, planning a life that was simple, honest, and fully ours. No more pretending. No more tiptoeing around someone else's need for attention. No more shrinking ourselves to make others comfortable. We had survived the storm. And now we were planting something real in the ruins. One afternoon, while unpacking a box marked Wedding Keepsakes, I found the folded copy of our vows. I sat on the living room floor, the sunlight pooling around me, and read them again. This time not with a lump of sadness in my throat, but with a quiet, fierce joy. Because every word still mattered. Every promise still held. Lisa's lies hadn't changed the truth. They hadn't tainted the love that brought us here. If anything, they had revealed it more clearly. Stripped away the glitter and pretense and forced us to choose each other again and again. And we had. Without hesitation. Without regret. A few months later, I learned I was pregnant. A real, quiet miracle, not a performance, not a weapon, just life blooming exactly as it was meant to. When we shared the news, it wasn't with a grand announcement or a stolen spotlight. It was with a handful of people gathered around our kitchen table, laughing and crying in equal measure, their joy genuine, their love unconditional. And as I stood there, my hand resting protectively over my stomach, I realized something. New beginnings don't always come with fanfare. Sometimes they come in soft moments, in real promises, in the choice to keep moving forward, no matter who tried to hold you back. And this beginning? It was mine. Finally, fully, beautifully mine.
Thanks so much for watching. If you love a good revenge story, or if you've ever dreamed of getting the last word without saying much at all, you're in the right place. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new savage ending. Because around here, karma always hits different.